It was a quiet Tuesday evening when I noticed something strange in our joint banking account. I had just made Daniel's dinner, baked salmon and steamed broccoli, his favorite before game day, and sat down to double-check the final payment for his college prep program. That's when I saw it, a withdrawal of $120,000, processed just a few days ago. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a glitch, maybe a delayed transfer from another account. But the more I clicked through the transaction history, the more real it became. The memo line read, "Down payment St. Lucia." My hand tightened on the mouse. I picked up the phone and called the bank. The woman on the other end was polite, professional. "Yes, ma'am," she said. That amount was confirmed by the joint account holder on file, Mr. Richard Harper. He stated it was for a family investment property overseas. A vacation home in St. Lucia. Except I never agreed to that. I'd never even heard of such a thing. I could hear Daniel's laughter echoing faintly from upstairs as I sat there frozen. The same boy who had asked me last week if we were still okay to afford his SAT tutoring sessions. The same boy whose entire college fund I had painstakingly built over the past 10 years by cutting coupons, skipping holidays, and turning down every luxury. I hung up the call without another word. My fingers trembled as I opened Richard's email. He wasn't the type to hide things very well digitally. Password reuse was his signature flaw, even in business. Within minutes, I found it a forwarded message from a real estate agency in Castries, and attached was a scanned deed, a modern beachfront property. 2 names were listed under the purchase agreement, Richard Harper and Celeste Boudreau. Celeste. I hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. She was the one who sent him poetry when we were dating, the one I thought was ancient history. A college infatuation, now back apparently as the co-owner of a home paid with my son's future. My ears rang, not with sadness, not even rage, but something else. Clarity. Because that night I realized something chilling. The vacation home was real. The betrayal was real. And the price I'd paid? Unforgivable. I poured myself a glass of water. My hands didn't shake anymore. Richard thought he had won something. But what he didn't realize was that he had just started a game I had already mastered. Richard and I met in grad school. He was charismatic, confident, the kind of man who could walk into any room and own it without even raising his voice. I was the quiet one. Numbers were my language, not charm. He noticed me at the library one night when I corrected the professor's economic projection in front of the class. Later, he told me it was the moment he fell in love, because I was the only person in the room who didn't need validation. Back then, we were a team. He had the vision. I had the spreadsheets. We built his startup together, often working out of our cramped apartment with takeout boxes stacked between files. I managed his books, wrote his first investor pitch, even found his first client, and when the company finally took off, he offered me a title, CFO and co-founder. Not in public, just between us. But then Daniel was born. It wasn't even a conversation. "You're so good with him," he said. "Why don't you stay home until we figure out daycare?" 1 year turned into 2, then 5. I didn't mind, not really. Daniel needed me, and Richard needed to travel. He said I was the backbone of the family, but every year his voice said it a little less. And every meeting I missed, every client dinner he stopped inviting me to, it all added up to silence. Eventually, the company grew to 30 employees, then 100, then 3 floors in a downtown building. But I stayed home, quiet, invisible, managing the home budget while he handled the empire. And I handled it well. Every dollar of Daniel's future was accounted for. I built his fund like a fortress. Automated deposits, monthly checks, diversifying into bonds, index funds. It was my second child. I even taught Daniel how to track interest gains when he turned 12. He'd beam at me. "You're like a money wizard, Mom." Richard never said thank you, but I didn't expect him to. That was my mistake. The first red flag wasn't even red. It was beige, like the hotel receipts I found in the laundry when Richard forgot to empty his pockets. I confronted him once. He brushed it off, said it was a meeting extension. A client had missed their flight. The second red flag came a year later, when Daniel asked, "Why does Dad call you the assistant when he's on speakerphone?" I laughed it off then, but something inside me splintered. Still, I stayed. I thought I was protecting Daniel. I told myself marriage was about endurance, that not every betrayal needed a reaction. But looking back, the truth is I was afraid. Afraid that if I stood up, I'd lose everything I had spent decades holding together. That night, sitting at the dining table staring at Celeste's name on a deed, I realized something I already had. The next morning, Richard left for a leadership retreat in Miami. He kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't carrying the weight of a betrayal heavy enough to crack the foundation of 25 years. I smiled back. I even packed his favorite linen shirt. But the moment the door closed behind him, I opened the laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just that I'd find it. His email was still logged in. He was sloppy with tech, always had been. I used to joke he could write a $10 million proposal, but still thought 2FA was a Star Wars character. Now it felt less funny. I searched for Celeste. Nothing. St. Lucia. Still nothing. Then I typed Amor. That was her handle, her email alias back in college. I hadn't thought of it in decades, but the moment I saw her name on that deed, it came rushing back like smoke under a door. One thread popped up, and from there the story unraveled. There were flight confirmations to Castries every 2 months. A rental car booked in her name, but paid with our business card. An invoice from a jewelry boutique, $14, $800 for custom design, emerald drop. A folder of PDFs with titles like St. Lucia guest bedroom concepts, wedding planner quote, and worst of all, prenuptial draft Harper / Boudreaux. I clicked through, numb. He was planning to marry her. The ink hadn't even dried on the mortgage, and he was drafting a future without me, with the money I had saved for our son's future. I stood up too fast. The room swayed. I forced myself to sit, breathe, drink water, and then I opened the company's shared drive. If he was this reckless with personal secrets, what about professional ones? The folder names were familiar. Budget projections, payroll, tax shielding strategies. That's when I saw it, an ownership file marked 2020 Reorganization Equity. I opened it, and everything shifted. The company was still partially under my name. Back in 2020, Richard had changed the corporate structure, but instead of dissolving my ownership, he had simply moved it into a silent shareholding, probably to dodge a capital gains tax or shield assets from liability. Whatever the reason, it didn't matter. My name was still there, legally, undeniably. I leaned back, staring at the screen. He had spent years treating me like a passive shadow, but in his arrogance, he had left me holding the detonator. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Love you, Mom. Thanks for making me pancakes." I stared at those words for a long time, then typed a name into my browser. Lori Brennan, corporate litigation attorney, Denver. She was the one who handled my friend Caroline's divorce, the one where the husband accidentally liquidated her trust fund and bought a boat. Lori had made sure he lost the boat, and the house, and his pride. I stared at her profile picture for a moment before hitting call. When she picked up, I said, "I'd like to schedule a consultation. I believe my husband is attempting to defraud our son, and I own half his empire." There was a pause. Then her voice, "You've come to the right place." Lori met me at a quiet coffee shop just off Pearl Street. She wore a tailored navy suit and a look that said she'd seen every form of betrayal a marriage could offer, and had won against all of them. I slid the printed equity documents across the table. She glanced at them, then looked up with an arch of her brow. "He didn't remove you. He buried you." I nodded. I was convenient to forget. She folded her hands. Legally, you still own 48% of Harper Logistics. You can call for a sale, a merger, or even freeze assets if there's reason to believe he's misappropriating funds. I hesitated. I don't want the company. I just want him to know he's not untouchable. She gave a thin smile. Then you have leverage, and with leverage we can take control. From that moment, we worked in silence, like war generals planning a siege. I authorized Lori to begin quiet inquiries to private buyers, not through mainstream brokers, but through back channels, old contacts I still had from my accounting days, men and women who didn't ask questions, only numbers. The company was valued at just over $8 million. Richard had grown it with the help of cheap labor and big egos, but the tech was solid and the logistics platform had government contracts. It was an attractive acquisition, especially to the right kind of buyer. Meanwhile, I remained the quiet wife. I cooked dinner, kissed Daniel goodnight, laughed politely at Richard's bland stories when he called from conferences. But each night, after the dishes were done, I sat at my desk building a digital war chest. Emails, screenshots, wire transfers, proof of commingling funds between business and personal use. Richard had funneled over $300,000 through Harper Logistics to cover Celeste's luxury expenses. That was enough to justify an emergency shareholder review and freeze spending if needed. The hardest part was waiting until the day Lori called. Her voice was calm but electric. We have a buyer, a quiet firm based in Austin. They're willing to buy out your shares in full, and they want majority control, which means if we do this now, Richard loses voting power overnight. I closed my eyes. I could hear Richard's voice from years ago. This company is everything I've built. No, it was everything we built, and everything he had gambled. I want to proceed, I said. Lori's voice sharpened. There's one more thing. The final offer includes an NDA for him, standard for buyouts, but we'll attach a clause. No access to the company post-sale. He'll have to walk away. Clean. I breathed in. Do it. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I had never felt this awake. Richard had no idea that while he was lounging on a resort balcony with Celeste, sipping champagne over some tropical sunset, his empire was being sold from under his feet. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had used our son's future to fund his fantasy. Now, I was using his fantasy to secure our son's future. And I wasn't done yet. It happened on a Thursday. Richard had flown to Paris with Celeste under the pretense of meeting a European logistics partner. I packed his suitcase with my usual care, watched him walk to the car, even kissed him goodbye. He texted me at 3:04 p.m. Landed. Paris is gorgeous. Might extend the trip. Daniel, okay? I replied, all good. Don't worry about a thing. By 5:37 p.m., the documents were signed. By 7:10 p.m., Harper Logistics had a new majority shareholder. And by 8 p.m., the board had received a formal notification. Richard Harper was no longer an executive officer, nor a voting stakeholder. The news would hit him in waves, but it would hit him hardest the moment he returned to Denver and scanned his key card at the elevator. The lock system had already been updated. His access? Revoked. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I sat in the dark, watching Daniel finish his homework, listening to the quiet hum of a house still holding its shape. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far, if maybe I should have warned him, given him a chance to explain. But then I remembered the look on Daniel's face 2 months ago, when he asked if we were still going to visit colleges this summer, and I had to lie. I remembered the coldness in Richard's voice when he snapped at me during dinner. This is why I don't involve you in business. You get emotional. And most of all, I remembered the bank's voice. Yes, Mrs. Harper, the withdrawal was authorized by your husband. No, I hadn't gone too far. He had. The next evening, Richard returned. Early. Unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen when the front door slammed open. His steps were fast, heavy, rehearsed in rage. He tossed his suitcase onto the floor, phone clenched in his hand like a weapon. You sold it. His voice was low, almost childlike. You sold my company. I dried my hands, turned to face him. Our company. You had no right. I tilted my head. I had 48%. That's more than enough right. His face contorted. You've ruined me. No, I said softly. You did that the moment you chose her over your own son. He stepped back as if slapped. I pulled a folder from the drawer and handed it to him. Inside were transaction records. Every dollar he'd funneled to Celeste through Harper Logistics. Personal charges on corporate cards. Plane tickets. Jewelry. Rent. You thought you were clever, hiding theft in the open. But you forgot who taught you to move money. He flipped through the pages, his hands shaking now. And by the way, I added she already knew. What? Celeste. She found out you used our son's college fund to buy her a beach house. She left you a message. I nodded toward his phone. She said she didn't sign up to be a thief's alibi. He didn't move, just stood there, hollowed out. I walked past him, calm, steady. There's a guest room ready if you want to sleep here tonight. But you leave in the morning. This house is still under my name. And Daniel deserves at least one parent who puts him first. He didn't answer. He just sank into the couch like a man, realizing the floor beneath him was made of sand. And the tide was already rising. Richard didn't leave the next morning. He sat on the back porch, staring into the yard like it might offer him an escape hatch. His phone had stopped buzzing around 2 a.m., likely when Celeste blocked him. The silence now was thick, almost cruel. I poured coffee. 1 mug. Mine. When I stepped outside, he looked up like a man who had aged a decade overnight. She really left, he said, his voice cracked. Didn't even say goodbye. Just gone. I didn't reply. Some things didn't deserve comfort. He stood slowly, the weight of his ruined kingdom dragging behind each step. Elaine, we can fix this. We can go to the board. There is no we, Richard. My voice was quiet, but it hit him harder than any scream. I could see it, the way his shoulders dropped, the way he stopped blinking. You lost the company. You lost her. And now you're losing us. He reached for me. I made a mistake, I know. I stepped back. You made a choice. Over and over. You chose ego over honesty. Power over partnership. Her over your own son. That's when he broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. He just crumbled. I thought I was building something great, he whispered. And I ended up with nothing. I looked at him for a long moment, not with hatred, but clarity. No, Richard. You ended up with exactly what you chose. He sat again, this time slower, like the weight inside him had finally matched the damage he caused. I let the silence stretch between us, then walked away. Daniel was in the kitchen, eating cereal. He looked up. Is Dad leaving? I nodded. Today. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He just said, Good. Later that afternoon, Richard packed what he could carry. No angry words. No accusations. Just the quiet grief of a man who saw the wreckage and knew he had lit the match. Before he walked out, he turned to me one last time. You were always smarter than me. I gave a sad smile, and you were too proud to ever admit it. The door closed behind him. That night, I sat on the porch where he'd sat that morning. Same view, different piece. I thought about everything he took, years of my life, trust, the future I thought we were building. But I also thought about what I still had. Daniel, the house, my name, my spine. And I thought about something Lori said when we finalized the sale. Sometimes, she told me, the best revenge isn't what you take. It's what you never let them destroy. She was right. 3 months later, we moved. It wasn't dramatic. No van, no big announcements. Just me and Daniel 2 suitcases, and a dog-eared journal where I'd written every cent I had hidden away over the years and what I planned to do with it. We settled in Carmel by the Sea, a sleepy coastal town with wind-swept trees and streets that smelled like salt and lavender. The kind of place that didn't ask questions, that welcomed new beginnings like old friends. Daniel adapted faster than I expected. He joined the local soccer team, started drawing again, laughed more freely. Sometimes I caught him watching the ocean with the same expression I used to wear, half wonder, half wait. One evening, I found him sitting on the sand, knees tucked to his chest, staring at the horizon. "Do you miss him?" he asked, not turning around. I sat beside him. Sometimes, even after everything, I was quiet for a while. Missing someone and forgiving them aren't the same thing. He was your father. He loved you in his own broken way. That doesn't mean we have to carry the parts of him that hurt us. Daniel nodded slowly. I think I'm okay with that. I smiled. Me too. That summer, I used part of the payout from the business to open a small bookshop on Ocean Avenue. Nothing fancy, just shelves of fiction, a reading nook by the window, and a bell over the door that chimed like laughter. I called it Second Chapter. People came. They stayed. They asked for recommendations and told me their stories like they'd been waiting for someone to listen. And I listened, because I knew how it felt to be unheard, to be unseen. One afternoon, a woman lingered near the counter. Maybe mid-50s, silver streak in her hair, wedding ring faintly absent. "Did you always want to run a bookstore?" she asked. I looked around, at the warm wood, the soft lamp light, the shelf where Daniel had added a handwritten staff picks sign. "No," I said, "but I always wanted to feel at home." She smiled. "You look like you do." Later that night, I closed the shop and walked home under a lavender sky. The ocean whispered in the distance, low and constant. Daniel was waiting at the porch, sketching something in a notebook. He grinned as I approached. "Hey, Mom," he said, holding up the page. It was a drawing of the bookstore with a small caption underneath. "My mom doesn't just run this place. She rebuilt herself in it." I felt something inside me break. Not from pain, from release. I sat beside him, pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in years I felt light. Because I hadn't just survived what Richard did. I had rewritten it. And in the silence he left behind, I had found something louder than revenge. I had found peace. People often ask me now, at book signings, at community talks, sometimes just strangers who've heard my story through whispers, how I managed to stay so calm, so composed, so exact. The truth is, I wasn't. There were nights I screamed into pillows, days I forgot to eat, hours I stood frozen at the sink, soap running down my wrists, wondering how everything I built could be so easily stolen. But I learned something in that stillness. I learned that power doesn't always come from raising your voice. Sometimes it comes from planning in silence, from watching, from waiting, from knowing exactly who you are, even when the world tries to forget you. And more than anything, I learned that love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't silence you, shrink you, or shame you for dreaming. It sits beside you on the porch at sunset. It helps you pick out a paint color for a new life. It comes in the shape of a son's quiet smile, or a second chapter carved out of pain and printed in peace. To any woman listening to this who feels small, forgotten, erased, you're not. You are not the quiet wife in the background. You are the author of the story. And sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's freedom.